Hi, my name is Ann Kent. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and the owner of Peas and Toppiness. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about an immersion blender. Earlier this year, I showed you a demonstration of how to use an immersion blender, but I've gotten several questions about just some troubleshooting having to do with an immersion blender, specifically how to release the suction that can form when you're using this in a pot, also how to protect the pot from becoming scratched, and I just want to reiterate how to use an immersion blender without splashing the hot liquid that is likely inside of your slow cooker. An immersion blender is great because you don't need to transfer the liquid out of the pot that you've cooked your food in. However, you want to make sure that you are taking care of that pot. So I'm going to demonstrate with just a clear plastic tub and some water so that you can see how this works. So first of all, an immersion blender, we're just going to push the button to make this spin. And the problem that people have been running into is when you're blending, it can get suction to the bottom of that pot. So when you're blending, so you can see that it's a little bit difficult for me to lift up on that. So when you lift up, you're at a danger of pulling it out of the water and then splashing the hot liquid everywhere. So in order to release the suction, it's very simple. You simply tilt the immersion blender. So you can see that here I've got some suction, so I'm just going to tilt it and that releases it. And now I can much more easily pull that out of the water. So another tip for protecting the pot is to make sure that you don't have that suction there. If you have the suction on, it's suctioned onto the bottom there, and then you drag your immersion blender around, that could potentially scratch the bottom of the pan. So especially if you have something that has Teflon on it, that's a non-stick, you want to be really careful not to do that. So my actual preferred method, instead of putting your immersion blender at the bottom and trying to just move it around like this with that suction, I found it's a lot easier to tilt your pot if at all possible, and to use this sort of in the corner of wherever your pot is. You can also use that at an angle then. You can angle that several different ways to make sure it doesn't get that suction. And that's also going to help you keep the blender below the level of liquid, which is what is going to prevent this from splashing all around. So you can see that this is a lot easier. I can tilt it, I can move it, and it's going to allow me to get any large chunks that I want to make sure that are all blended up without having to move that around a whole lot. So the last thing to clean this before you move on, once you've blended all of your liquid, is just to hold this above the liquid but below the edge of the pot, and then to run that blade a couple of times, and that will get any of the excess soup or whatever else you're blending off of the blender, and then you can clean it. I like to clean this right away because otherwise it's very difficult to clean if you've let it sit for a while and have caked on materials. So I actually like to have my pot of soapy water, and I'll do the same method of blending right in my dishwater to clean that off a little bit. That makes it way easier. And then of course, make sure to detach it and then finish washing it. Never ever wash that with this attached. Don't stick your fingers in there. That could be very, very dangerous if this is still attached and there's a potential for it to blend on accident. If you have any other questions, if there's other troubleshooting things that you would like to see, please drop a comment and let me know. This is a super helpful technique for all kinds of creamy soups this winter. So I will drop a link to one of my favorite butternut squash creamy soups that I use this immersion blender technique for, and hopefully you can enjoy some winter squash this coming season. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to catching you again next week. Take care.